Welcome back to Brazil Crypto Report. Today I'm joined by Gean Chu, who's a venture partner at Honey Island Capital, which is one of Brazil's leading fintech VCs. We talk about the firm's new Web3 fund, which focuses on liquid tokens and on-chain strategies like farming, staking, and liquidity provision. All right. So I'm here with Gean Chu from Honey Island Capital. Thanks so much for being here, Gean.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Aaron.
Amazing. So to get started, why don't you tell us a bit about just yourself and then Honey Island Capital?
Sure. So I'm a computer engineer. I had an entrepreneur career for a few years, and recently I came back to my origins in technology and investments in Honey Island Capital. So Honey Island Capital, the name of the fund comes from a famous island here called Ilha do Mel in Portuguese, but we are mostly known as a fintech-focused fund. So the founders of Honey Island Capital are some of the same founders of Ebanx. So Ebanx is one of the major fintech companies here in Brazil. It's one of our fintech unicorns here. So when Ebanx became a unicorn, the founders started to do some angel investments, and eventually that got to a decent size. So they decided to build a vehicle to accommodate those investments, and that was the start of Honey Island Capital. So they invited Mariana, which is one of our managing partners here, and to organize these investments. She is one of the first people from Endeavor here in Brazil. At a second stage, they decided to onboard external capital as well. So not only their proprietary capital, but also external capital. And that was the start of Honey Island as a proper fund. So we launched a second fund, a third fund, a new fund with another asset manager here called Quatrum. And we got to position ourselves as one of the leading VC funds on the fintech space in Brazil. So that was it. And as a fintech specialized fund, it started to become clear to us that Web3 was one important next frontier of the fintech space. So we started to do a lot of research in that space and some investment as well. One of those investments was on Liquidity, which is one of the major tokenizing companies here in Brazil. And eventually we decided to do another step, a deeper step. We decided to build a new fund within Honey Island Capital focused only on Web3, and that's my job right now. So I'm a venture partner at Honey Island Capital. I was invited to co-found this new fund here. And what we do here, which is very different from all the other funds from Honey Island Capital, is that this is not a VC fund. So we don't invest in equity here. We are focused on liquid tokens. So what are liquid tokens? Liquid tokens are tokens that are listed on centralized exchanges or decentralized exchanges. They are assets that are liquid to be traded. So that is very interesting to us because it allows us to get exposure to this very new industry with a lot of upside. But every day we get to decide if we still believe in this thesis for one market or for another. We believe in one player or another, which means we can every day decide if we want to change our exposure to risk, if we want to change which horse we're betting on, and so on. So that's what is very different from the other products here at Honey Island Capital.
Got it. And then I'd like to dive into a bit more of your strategy and your structure. But before we do that, I'd like to get a better idea of kind of how you came to be in this position. So you said you started your career as computer engineer, software engineer, and then as an entrepreneur, and then now you're on the venture side of things. Maybe give us a bit more detail on kind of how your career trajectory here.
Yeah, well, I had quite an interesting career actually. So as I said, I graduated as a computer engineer. I was a very passionate computer engineer. So I graduated as top of the class, summa cum laude. I got scholarships for master degrees and so on. But as soon as I graduated, I was completely passionate by entrepreneurism. So I decided to build my own company. And back then, I started to think why innovations were happening only on technology. So I got inspired by the innovations that were happening on technology and decided to build my first company in other fields. And I actually built an ice cream company, and it became a big deal. It became a big deal. I don't know if you ever heard of Mexican paletas mexicanas. It was a big thing here in Brazil back in 2013, 2014. So we built this industry. So we got to be the fifth largest ice cream company in Brazil. It was quite an interesting experience. So yeah, what changed from then to now is that I left the operations from my companies to my partners to run, and now I'm completely dedicated to Web3. So I never stepped away from technology. I was always following it closely from a passion side, and that passion started to grow more and more inside of me. So I started to do some Web3 investments back in 2017. Some close friends around me started to ask to join those investments with me. So that was something very small, only between close friends. But eventually that started to grow more and more. And some of those close friends were fund managers here from Curitiba. And so when Honey Island decided to build this Web3 dedicated fund, they already knew the work that I was doing, and they invited me. It was a very interesting moment for me because the companies were ready to allow myself to step away from the administration of the companies and allow me to embrace this new challenge. So nowadays I have the opportunity to do a thing that I'm completely passionate about, and something that I believe that might change the world. So it's been very, very interesting.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I love the jump from ice cream into Web3. I mean, that's I've thought I've heard it all in crypto, but I've never heard quite I guess throw in a little bit of AI into that. I think you've got a winning proposition.
Well, that was part of my master degree, a bit of AI.
Nice. No, that's super cool. I always just love hearing about how people end up falling into the kind of the crypto Web3 rabbit hole, because everyone has a kind of a unique entrance story, such as yourself. So thank you for sharing that. So we'd love to dive in a bit more to kind of the value proposition, or the kind of the fund proposition, some of your investment theses at Honey Island, and maybe talk a bit just kind of generally about the broader fund itself, and the broader firm. Obviously, it's a fintech focused firm, and obviously Brazil is a hotbed for fintechs, and that's not exactly a secret at this point. So maybe talk a bit about just the investment thesis more broadly, and then we can dive into what your fund specifically is looking to accomplish.
Sure, great. So Latin America is a very thriving place for fintechs. So we have so many people in need of credit, especially here. So startups focusing on bringing credit to specialized opportunities is something that we are very bullish on here. So many of our invested companies here are focused on bringing credit to or financial services to unbanked people or specific types of companies here. And we believe that finance can transform a country, can transform societies. Everything nowadays have a touch of financial elements. So the fintech space is really broad and can embrace many different kinds of markets.
Yeah, absolutely. And then let's maybe talk a bit about what are some of the success stories that the some of the successes that the fund has invested in, whether it be from the Web2 or Web3 side of things. Like obviously Leaky's, kind of a hot emerging company right now in the tokenization space. But are there any kind of other champions that have, or success stories that you're pointing to as these are some of the big wins?
Yeah, sure. So one of the oldest we can bring here is like Contabilize. So the best success stories, they always will be from the earliest stages of the fund, because they got the time to mature to now be able to be accounted as a big success story. So the newest investments, they haven't had the time yet to mature yet. But as you said, Leaky is a very, very potential case. But speaking of the oldest ones, so Contabilize is a very interesting case. They revolutionized the way accounting firms work here in Brazil. So they managed to bring very, very cheap accounting services, enabling companies here to access very good quality accounting services at very cheap prices, much cheaper than any other accounting firm were able to bring back in the day, because they did that through technology, using a concentrated service in one specific location and bringing that kind of service to the entire country through the internet. So that's the kind of thing that we try to bring here. Specifically on Web3, what we do here is to bring a fundamental approach to screen the entire market, and now globally, right? Because on the VC side, we are very Latin focused, but on the Web3 side, we get to analyze opportunities throughout the whole globe, right? So we analyze fundamentally tokens to build our positions. We have a multi-strategy approach here. So part of our strategy here is to build a defensive position to fall less when the market's falling, and a bigger beta for the upside when the market's on a bull spirit. We try to bring quantitative approaches as well to help us make decisions on when to increase or decrease our risk exposure as well. So that's a bit of what we do here. Right now, our Web3 fund is in a more of a lab phase. So we are only using proprietary capital, just as when the first fund, the first VC fund of Funny Island was only using proprietary capital. The Web3 fund is only using proprietary capital right now. We are going to wait for a few more months, and we are planning on bringing that product to the market only next year, maybe. So we are going to allow this lab phase to run its course, to make the experience, bring all the expertise we want to consolidate here, to then bring it to our other clients.
Got it. So going back to your strategy of really focusing on liquid tokens, this seems, I guess, in my view, this seems a bit sort of maybe counterintuitive to what I think a lot of other firms might be doing, which is really taking more of an equity position, just given, tokens aren't quite doing as well as they have in the past, price-wise. But maybe talk a bit about why you've taken this particular strategy, and kind of, this is not like a new debate necessarily, the equity versus tokens conundrum, if you will. It's not, a new debate here at all, but maybe talk a bit about why you are bullish on the token approach at this point in time.
Yeah, tokens allow us to extract alpha in a very different kind of way. So what we do here that's very different is that we are a native Web3 fund. So we not only invest on technology, we actually use it. So we engage on chain, we use different blockchains, we use DEXs, staking, farming, we provide liquidity. So that is very different. And operating on-chain allows us to build alpha, to build returns in a very different way than only buying and selling tokens on centralized exchanges, which is what most funds do nowadays. So we can only do that through tokens. So generating yield through farming, through staking, using DeFi as it was meant to be used. And using all of those tools also gives us a very different level of insight on what these technologies have to evolve in order to be able to onboard the next billion users. Using those tools really allows us to understand the technology, to feel the pain points, and so on.
Got it. And then maybe talk a bit about the types of projects or the types of tokens that you guys are either already invested in, or you're kind of doing some due diligence on, or you might have in the pipeline. I mean, I realize you guys just launched maybe a couple of months ago, so you're still fairly new in the game. But what is kind of that portfolio, or how are you thinking about that portfolio construction at this point in time?
Sure. So at this moment, we are mostly focused on infrastructure tokens, infrastructure projects such as L1s, L2s, and so on, and DeFi. So most of the most well-known DeFi projects, a bit of some new projects that are completely out of the radar for most people yet. So these are some small caps bets that we take on sometimes, some IDOs, but generally speaking, infrastructure and DeFi, and a bit of intercommunication as well. So protocols, investing on building bridges, messaging protocols, that sort of thing as well, for the multi-chain narrative.
Got it. And then switching gears here a little bit. So you posted fairly recently a really good thread, I thought, on Twitter about kind of the digital real. You kind of laid out a nice kind of case for what this exactly is, and why this is something that people around the world should be paying attention to, and kind of what it means for the Brazilian financial ecosystem. And maybe just hoping you could maybe summarize a bit what you're trying to communicate in that thread, and just given that you all are a fintech focused VC in Brazil that has like a Web3 bent to it now, I'd love to get into a conversation here about how you see all that, your existing investment theses overlapping with what's happening in the digital real economy right now, or what is becoming the digital real economy, still obviously in pilot right now. But yeah, I would love if we could kind of dive into that.
Sure. Yeah, that was a bit of a long thread, so I'll focus on some parts of it. What I wanted to talk about mostly in there is that approach of a governmental permissioned blockchain that Brazil is taking. That is very interesting because right now it is on an early stage. Brazil is building its own blockchain, specifically right now for a CBDC, a wholesale CBDC only to circulate between banks. But as a next stage, they will start to tokenize bonds, treasuries, that kind of thing, and on a later stage, smart contracts as well. And what is very different is that will not be a public blockchain. That will be a permissioned blockchain. So only financial institutions will be able to build smart contracts in there. So I think that's a very interesting conversation because a lot of the new technology that is being built on public blockchains will exist on this permissioned blockchain. Most of these technologies are open source, so they are based on a free license. So generally, that usually means that other companies can take that technology and fork it. So banks and other financial institutions here in Brazil will basically take all the stack, fork it inside of the national blockchain here, and use it. And I think protocols and founders have to start taking a look at a possible future when other countries start taking that approach as well, building their own blockchains on with fences around it, and how protocol builders, founders can take advantage of that. Otherwise, all of that new technology they're building, these innovation they're building, will just be granted to other people. So what I try to suggest in that thread is maybe there should be a discussion on the new kind of software license that allows for innovation on public blockchains, but also protects builders, founders in that kind of situation to protect their intellectual property in the case of permissioned blockchains.
Interesting. Well, this is probably a whole separate conversation altogether, but I think it's quite interesting. And you are seeing a lot of examples of this happening where even with, I think it was like this Bank for International Settlements. It might have been the Project Mariana, where they basically took the Curve kind of stablecoin pooling model. They just sort of took that code and then built their own version of it, essentially.
Yeah, the JP Morgan sandbox project as well. They use Aave code as well. So we are seeing some elements of that already happening.
But isn't that maybe isn't that kind of like the point of open source, though? Is that anybody can kind of take the code and run with it, in
a sort of way, yes. So that's depending on what the founder, the builder of that intellectual property wanted from that. So yeah, if they are building it just as a common good, then yes. But if they want to make a profit of that in some way, maybe from the use of the technology, then I would say maybe no, because they're building that technology and the use cases would be fancied inside of other countries' blockchains where they would have no access unless they became financial institutions, which we know it's very, very hard. It's a long process, and there are many restrictions on who can be a financial institution in each jurisdiction.
Right. Yeah, and obviously we've seen that even with the digital rail pilot here, where there's 16 consortiums participating, but every consortium has to have a regulated financial institution involved in order to be able to basically run a node on the digital rail testnet, right?
Yeah.
So I think you even saw
an approach of saying if something like that is right or wrong. I just think it's an important thing to be discussed.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a bit of a totally different conversation. I think that's probably, it would be a fun one to have with a group of lawyers and open source builders. But I think it's one you're going to start seeing. It'll probably become much more relevant in the next year or two as some of these innovations start being I'm not sure what the right word would here be, co-opted or just, kind of copy and pasted into permissioned systems that governments are building for themselves, where the person who actually, or the team that actually created the thing itself is sort of shut out from the value of it.
More specifically on the CBDC project here in Brazil, the Real Digital project, it's very interesting. So as a wholesale CBDC, it's a digital currency that will only circulate throughout institutions. So let's say I want to transfer money to you. So I use bank A and you use bank B. What would happen is my bank A, would destroy my tokens, transfer CBDCs to your bank, and your bank would mint bank B tokens to you. So our banks would have non-fungible tokens. So bank A reals wouldn't be fungible with bank B reals, but that would be all transparent to the user. It wouldn't matter because it will all be in a very smooth interface. But even so, that is very, very interesting because the way the financial system works today is that banks transfer messages basically to one another. They don't transfer value digitally. It's much harder to do that. So whenever Bank A transfer money to Bank B nowadays, there's actually an internal account where Bank A has an account on Bank B and Bank B has an account on Bank A. So that they make this internal transfer, which is called Nostro and Vostro accounts. And from time to time, they settle these differences. So there is an actual physical transfer of money. So cars transferring cash, airplanes transferring cash, that kind of thing, which is crazy to think that nowadays that kind of thing still has to exist. So what's very, very interesting is that with CBDCs, with wholesale CBDCs, they can actually transfer value through the message. So it's much, much more efficient. And this also allows for the central bank to monitor in real time all of the bank's balance sheets. So today they depend on like manual balance sheets, which are published from time to time. So the level of risk that banks sometimes are running, it's not completely known for the regulator, which leads to situations such as the bank crisis, Silicon Valley banks, Bank, and that kind of thing, you know. So allowing for the regulator to see the actual balance sheets in real time on transparent blockchains will allow for a much safer financial system.
Yeah, I think the Silicon Valley bank crisis of a couple of months ago really highlighted the extent to which I think even people in the crypto industry who are the inherently sort of people who are skeptical of banks and we're even shocked at like just how maybe little transparency there is into this, even in a fully heavily regulated market like the U.S. So that's super interesting. And I like the way you're describing that. It's a very sort of the way you're putting that makes a lot of sense in my mind. It's helping me kind of envision how this system actually is going to work and what the value is going to be.
We try to take that kind of first principles approach because it helps us to understand not only the short-term like price actions of tokens and that kind of thing, but really the fundamentals that will make some types of technologies thrive on possible different futures. So I'm not saying that will happen, that each country will definitely have their own blockchain and that sort of thing. But it is a possible future. So in that possible future, what kind of projects should we invest on to get exposure to a possible upside in that kind of scenario? And if that doesn't happen, what kind of project should we invest in? So by understanding every possible future on the long run, we can position ourselves to be able to get benefits from any possible way that technology evolves,
Got it. And on piggybacking off of that response, maybe talk a bit more about what your investment thesis with regards to how your kind of the fintech arm of the fund and kind of the fintech sort of ethos of the fund really overlaps with what you see or what could potentially be this digital rail economy, this tokenized financial system that the banking system elites here have been developing.
Yeah. So as an investment company, we share a few beliefs on where the financial technologies should evolve as a whole. So when we talk about our different investment funds within Hanyan Capital, it is more of the type of investment. So whenever a Web3 opportunity arrives, if it is a token opportunity, it is on my fund. If it is an equity opportunity, is for my colleagues, the VC side. So it's much the difference between the vehicles is much more focused on the type of investments and not the core beliefs.
Got it. And then anything else you want to add on how? I mean, I'd be interested in particular in kind of how you see your vantage point to the token focused side of things could potentially interact. What opportunities are there here with kind of a tokenized financial system in Brazil? Are you looking at, any of these kind of real world assets or any of these kind of, tokenized assets that we're seeing, tokenized bonds or tokenized debentures, tokenized carbon credits, all these sorts of things? Are these types of things that you're looking at, or are you kind of maybe more focusing on maybe more of like the crypto native type of tokens?
Yeah, we are definitely very interested in that, and we already have exposure to that through Leaky. So Leaky, as a leading tokenizing company, bring Honey Island Capital as an investment firm exposure to all of that narrative. So a few things that we try to do different on the Web3 native fund, which is the one that I run, is to go search for opportunities that are only available here. So very, very native things, such as DeFi, such as like bridges, intercommunication, L2s, ZK, that sort of thing.
Got it. Got it. Cool. Well, that about concludes our time here. But would love to get just kind of give you the final word here if you have anything else you want to add. And I would love to hear from you, just who are you interested in talking to? What type of projects are you interested in maybe getting in touch with? And then how can folks best get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. You can look up for me on LinkedIn at Gean Chu, or Twitter as well. It's Gean Chu as well. It's really easy to find me. And well, I think some final words here is that I'm really excited about this moment that we are living right now. I think we are one of the first funds here of a new type of funds that will start to arrive more and more. Funds that actually engage natively with this kind of technology. There is so much opportunities, so much alpha that can be extracted on the market. Opportunities that don't exist today on TradFi. There's so much asymmetry of information, of technology, opportunities that only exist on chain, and that we are being able to engage with that. So I think more and more other funds will start to take that approach as well. There's obviously some, as the regulation evolves as well, that will bring more and more comfort for other institutions to take their approach as well. We have definitely done our homework here to build our security policies and to engage with policymakers and regulators to run our strategies with a lot of safety. But I think with more clarity, especially in the US, more and more funds will start to take their approach. And I think that's the way to go. I think that's the future for investments, for a new set of funds that will arrive in the market.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Gean, I just want to thank you so much for your time. It's great to have this conversation. Great to finally get you on the show here. And thanks to everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah.